back to Before Dining. I'm Bronwyn Fletcher, and today I want to talk to you about something that we pair with everything we do in the Waiting for Happiness project, and that's journal writing. Journal writing not as a nice to have, but as a practical tool for investigating your weight story and a way to understand all that history that sits beneath your eating. We see that it's a skill that really lets you reconnect your mind with your body and often begin a long overdue conversation with yourself. In fact, there are two additional skills I consider non-negotiable if you want permanent weight change, and those are journal writing, which we'll be talking about today, and the other one is emotional literacy, which I'll be covering next week. So in this episode, we'll focus on the journal writing, but it's journal writing that has a very particular purpose, and of course, how it relates to weight loss. But we want to talk about using it in a very practical way. But let's start with the obvious question, like what is the connection between journal writing and weight loss? Sounds like a bit of a long bow. Well, if you've tried to lose weight several times, which I'm sure as a listener you have, you already know that finding information about weight loss isn't a problem. You know what's in chocolate. You probably know how many points, macros, calories are in most of the foods that you eat. And you probably also know the theory of weight loss. In fact, some of you, I know, could probably run your own diet group. And yet you haven't been able to solve your weight problem permanently. Yes, diets can actually take the edge off, help you lose some weight, but it's this problem of the weight returning that we're always trying to get to the root cause of with the work that we do. So we can pretty much sum up to say that we know that the problem about weight loss isn't due to a lack of information. It's something deeper and much more personal. And as we've covered in previous episodes, recurring weight is not just a food issue, it's a life issue. And we know you can't solve complex life issues with a meal plan. So you need other methods to investigate and understand your personal weight circumstance, and you need a way to be able to capture what you discover so it doesn't just drift away. So that's what journal writing is for. It becomes your thinking space, your laboratory, if you like, and the place to record what you find, and it keeps everything in one place. But you might be thinking, I already spend way too much time obsessing about my weight. But that's not what I'm talking about here. When it comes to finding new solutions for weight loss, particularly, as we know, in this recurring weight pattern, thinking and talking aren't enough. Now, I'm not talking about talking as in therapy talking, but just trying to take your own thought processes through it. Thinking is slippery. You could be in the shower and have a real insight into your weight, and by the time you get out and getting dried, that insight is gone. So being able to capture those insights and see them in front of you is highly important. They kind of put an anchor in the ground, and then from there you can move further forward. And let's face it, talking in general can be helpful. If you've got a good friend that you talk to and you talk through all sorts of problems, weight may be one of them. But with talking, it's easy to rehearse the same story, and particularly those ones that sound like those single story explanations like I'm a chocoholic, or I've got a sweet tooth, or I've got no willpower. Those kinds of stories and talking about them and using them, they keep you stuck in the same loop. Journal writing does something different. When you write your thoughts and feelings and observations about your weight, it's this thing about anchoring them on the page. You can see them in front of you, you can come back to them, and you can work with them to go deeper. And as we know, going deeper is really what's needed with all of this. It's not about writing something profound or beautiful, although that might be nice. It's about getting what's in your head out where you can work with it. Think about it initially as like getting out the raw material and then over time being able to refine it into clear insights. But let's just back up a step and cover some of the specific reasons that journaling of this type can help you. First of all, there's the idea that journal writing is a way to have that conversation with yourself. And many women that I speak to, they've never really had that conversation. So it's one that's long overdue. Most women have short and harsh ways of speaking with themselves that often sounds like, I've ruined the day now. I shouldn't have eaten that. Why can't I ever stick to a diet? That's not a conversation. That's a monologue with a critic. Journal writing gives you a place to speak with yourself differently. It lets you ask questions and get different answers instead of just being handed out these criticisms from the voices that circle around in your head. On the page, you can be curious instead of critical. And it's also a place where you can say things that you would never admit out loud. And because we know there's a lot of hidden eating goes on with recycling and repeating weight patterns, that's a really important thing to do to stop the shame in its tracks. In a journal, you can try out different explanations and maybe even see which one feels more true for you. Over time, these conversations can help you separate from being the problem to having a problem, which is a very different place to stand. The next way journal writing can help solve a recurring weight problem is by helping as a way back into your body. Let me just explain that a bit more. So let's talk about your body for a moment. In my many conversations with women, there are two common baseline emotional states, let's call them. One is where they are hyper alert and always on edge, and the other is feeling numb and not being able to feel anything really. And there's also many women that just bounce between the two. So here's the thing, you can't change eating in a sustainable way if you can't recognize your hunger and fullness signals. And when you feel disconnected from your body, it usually means that you can't name the emotions that sit below the surface, the very emotions that actually drive your overeating. So journal writing is an effective training ground for finding your way back into your body. You could start by describing body sensations in some simple language. The simple language may sound like, I ate a lot of chocolate and it still didn't satisfy me. Or I ate until I had a pain in the stomach. At first, it might feel clumsy or pointless, but what you're doing is you're rebuilding a bridge between your mind and your body. Writing these things down, even in a few lines a day, is a big part of how women move from numbness or constant alertness back into a steadier place where choice is even possible. Another aspect of journal writing is that it is a skill that helps you move beyond the limiting single story. Every woman who comes into this work that we do has a single story about her weight. And it usually sounds something like, I'm addicted to sugar or I need more willpower. The problem with single stories is that they feel complete. There's almost like there's no room for anything else. The complaint, and it's also the answer kind of rolled up into one. So journal writing is where you start to break that story open and get a good look at what's inside. On the page of the journal, you might discover that you're not really addicted to sugar, but you do need it when you're frightened or angry. Or you might discover it's not really about willpower, but a repeating pattern that happens each time you quit out of a diet. The more you explore, the more you'll see that your eating has a logic, that it's actually doing some kind of job. And that's the beginning of developing different ways of dealing with things. So let's bring this down to ground level. How do you actually use a journal for this work? Well, first off, you don't need a special book. You don't need an hour. You certainly don't need to be good at writing. To give it a try, here's a simple structure that you can try for the next week. Just at the end of the day, try a quick check-in with yourself by asking one question. And the question is, what kind of day have I had today emotionally? And write what comes up, just a few lines, no essays, just a 5-minute catch up with yourself. And I think even 5 minutes in busy lives is something that you might be able to just find a gap for. There's another way your journal can be useful, and that is in recognising patterns. You might want to choose one eating situation that you'd like to understand better. So for example, nighttime eating. So the way you'd use the journal is you would write down what you want to know about. Things like, what time does it start? Is there anything that you can recognise that happens just before? And if you're feeling brave, you might even be able to write down what you ate and how much. After a few recordings, you can start to look for links, you can start to look for patterns, and it sort of becomes that investigative tool that helps you get to different places and find different pieces of information that start to make the whole system fit together. So let's just recap why this matters for recurring weight. Well, hopefully by now, if you've been listening along, you know that with recurring weight, that you're dealing with an eating system that has pretty much three things guaranteed. Firstly, there's the emotional food shortcuts that you've relied on for decades, that you have hidden cultural and family eating rules that need to be brought to the surface, and probably a mind that keeps blocking answers because it puts up the blame and shame and self-criticism. So dealing with these three things, you really do need skills and tools that can bypass the shame and the self-criticism in particular. You need methods that don't judge or ask you to be anyone other than who you are or anywhere different to where you're at. And that's the role that journal writing can provide. It can connect you with your wisdom, your own body intelligence, rather than outsourcing everything to the next diet. Next week, we're going to look at emotional literacy, and that is about how to put words around what you feel and why that matters so much when it comes to changing your relationship with food. Because journal writing and emotional literacy really are complementary. Where journal writing gives you the place and the space, emotional literacy gives you the language. And together they connect emotion and action. And that's really important if you want to understand relief eating. So before we finish, let me leave you with one short activity. Grab a notebook or some paper and finish this one simple fill-in-the-blanket statement. It reads, I describe my relationship with food as. You don't need to show this to anyone, it's just for you, but it might be the start of a very important conversation for you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave me a review or share a comment so that other women who are also looking for a shame-free conversation about weight can find the podcast. And if you want some help getting started with writing a journal, have a look at our 5-week email journal writing course. It's a simple way to keep the channel open and keep going. And if you're ready to dig deep into the root cause of your repeating weight, we have the tools and the roadmap that will take you there. So head on over to waitingforhappiness.com.au. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week when we'll dive into emotional literacy.